The first details have emerged about the talks between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky in Florida. In particular, the Russians have already rejected any 60-day ceasefire so that a referendum and presidential elections could be held in Ukraine. The Russians demand Ukraine's immediate and complete withdrawal from Donbass. Trump's team also claims to fully support this idea. And besides, Trump will talk to Vladimir Putin again right after meeting with Vladimir Zelensky. And what's interesting is that even before the talks with Zelensky began, Trump called Putin, and they agreed that the United States and the Russian Federation would create two working groups on security issues and economic relations. So here, Putin still got his way, and the war isn't over yet, but the Russians and the Americans are already discussing how they're going to act. But what's telling is that it seems Zelensky wasn't surprised at all. Moreover, Zelensky seemed absolutely prepared for this. The thing is, on the eve of the meeting, at the moment when Zelensky was still shaking hands with Donald Trump and they were just entering the American president's residence, Mar-a-Lago, the Financial Times published an article stating that Zelensky does not expect any concessions from the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin and, on the contrary, hopes to persuade Donald Trump to increase pressure on Russia. The idea was that the Russians would not agree to the initiatives outlined in the 20-point peace plan, so they need to be pressured. And now, all these issues are still being discussed behind closed doors. Interestingly, Donald Trump insisted that the negotiations continue specifically behind closed doors. Although earlier it was announced that they would take place with the participation of journalists and in a completely open format. So, let's quickly discuss the main points that are known at the moment and summarize the initial results of the negotiations. And I urge you to definitely subscribe to this YouTube channel because we will continue to summarize all the results and analyze everything that was agreed upon and what was not agreed upon between Trump, Zelensky, and Putin. My name is Alexei Pechi. Let's discuss this topic together, but before we start, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, write any comment under this episode, and subscribe to my Telegram channel. Alexei Pechi. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as it comes in. So, now let's go through everything step by step, because there's definitely a lot to talk about here. Today, as you know, in Florida, at Mar-a-Lago, the residence of the American president, there is a meeting between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Donald Trump. And right before this meeting started, Trump called the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin, and after that conversation he immediately went to see Zelensky. The Russians' move was expected, as they're clearly trying to disrupt the negotiations and undermine the talks themselves. And right after Trump's call to Putin, the Russians announced their conditions for ending the war. So, during the phone conversation with Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin stated that Ukraine must surrender the entire Donbass in order to end the war. Yuri Ushakov, an aide to the Russian president, reported this. He said the conversation between Putin and Trump was initiated by the American side. It was, quote, friendly, cordial, and businesslike in nature and lasted for an hour. And now I'll quote Ushakov. The presidents of Russia and the United States generally share similar views. That the temporary ceasefire proposed by the Ukrainians and Europeans, under the pretext of preparing for a referendum or other reasons, only leads to prolonging the conflict, and it is fraught with the risk of renewed hostilities. In general, in this quote, Putin immediately made it clear to Trump that he doesn't want any ceasefire, and he wants Ukraine to simply surrender its territories, and he is not going to back down. Furthermore, according to Ushakov, for the final end of the war, Kyiv must, without delay, make a decision on Donbass taking into account, quote, the situation developing on the front lines. Let me remind you that just yesterday, Putin put on a real show for Donald Trump. He appeared again in military uniform, supposedly at the command post of the Russian occupation forces, where he was informed about the capture of the Ukrainian city of Huliaipol in the Zaporizhzhia region and Mirnohrad in Donetsk. And there, Putin said that overall we're no longer really interested in having the Ukrainian armed forces withdrawn from Donbass. He said the breakthrough is so rapid they plan to capture all these territories by force, and this is the message they're promoting today. Yesterday on my broadcast, I said this show was for one viewer, Donald Trump, and now that's confirmed. Ushakov is basically echoing the words that Putin said yesterday. And at the same time, according to Ushakov, Trump said that, quote, he was convinced of Russia's desire for a political and diplomatic settlement. It is precisely with this in mind that he intends to conduct today's negotiations with Volodymyr Zelensky, says Ushakov. In addition, Putin and Trump exchanged a series of courtesies. Trump stated that there are impressive prospects for economic cooperation between the United States, Russia, and Ukraine if the war ends. The interlocutors also exchanged New Year's greetings and wished happiness to the peoples of both countries. Well, according to Ushakov, after today's meeting with Zelensky, Trump will call Vladimir Putin again. Well, it's already known that before that, he will first call the Europeans. So the chronology is that first he called Putin and talked to him, now he's meeting with Zelensky, after that there will be a call with the Europeans, and after that he will call Putin again. And well, something should become clear in this situation. But by the way, Trump said today that either a peace agreement will be signed in the near future, or the war will last for a very, very long time. Hinting that either accept all the conditions now, or, well, you won't have to accept anything at all because there won't be an offer as such. But what else is interesting, as Ushakov announced, is this statement about some 2 working groups. So, as Ushakov stated, he agreed with the American side's proposal to continue working within the framework of 2 specially created working groups. The first is on various aspects of security, the second is on economic issues. The parameters of these working groups will be agreed upon at the beginning of January. Well, that's an interesting point. I always say, as soon as the Russians start creating a number of working groups, it's a clear sign that they're stalling for time. We've been through this before. And remember, back in May, Putin was shouting, "Yes, I'll come to Turkey now." Zelensky said, "Yes, I'll come too. We'll meet." And Trump also said, "Let's meet the 3 of us already." But the Russians started saying, "Let's hold consultations, 1 million working groups," and so on. All this just leads to a banal waste of time. So, to sum up, I can say that before the negotiations with Zelensky, the Russians basically told Trump, listen, we don't agree to any temporary ceasefire, we don't agree to any territorial concessions, and we don't agree to any demilitarized zone. Let the Ukrainians leave Donbass, that's it. And in the meantime, let's discuss how we'll do business and trade right after the war ends. And it was in this mood that Trump went to meet with the Ukrainian delegation. Interestingly, Zelensky was not at all surprised by the content of the Trump-Putin talks. Moreover, Zelensky seemed to be prepared for this. I would even say he was laying the groundwork for such an outcome. The Financial Times writes that the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, told European leaders that they did not expect Russia to abandon its maximalist demands and do not expect it to agree to the proposed peace plan. He stated this before his meeting with United States President Donald Trump. And those who were present during the phone conversation said that they were not particularly surprised because everything was as rational as possible. According to them, Zelensky emphasized that in this regard, he would like to achieve from the head of the White House, on the contrary, increased pressure on Russia. It's pretty obvious that Putin will not give up his maximalist goals. Therefore, the task was not for Trump to somehow push them or anything like that, no, but for Trump to finally understand that the Russians are not capable of making agreements, so they need to be pressured. And now a number of American media outlets, are analyzing what's happening in these negotiations. And for example, they say that when Trump sat down at the table with Zelensky, it was obvious that he was in hospitality mode. And this may indicate a more relaxed atmosphere during today's negotiations. Sky News also reports that at the start of the talks, Zelensky told Trump it was his first time at Mar-a-Lago. To which the United States President replied that this place is very well suited for signing deals. In general, this is the kind of atmosphere in which the negotiations between Trump and Zelensky are taking place right now, as soon as they come out of the press conference, and they promised to come out of the press conference. After these negotiations, new details will emerge, and we will discuss them with you right away. So friends, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel so you don't miss the next episode. And I hope that many of you will stay, won't go to sleep, and will wait for the results of these negotiations. So I'll leave it at that for now. Be sure to write your comments, your expectations, and your predictions. Do you find this episode interesting and was it informative for you? You can support this YouTube channel with your donation or by subscribing through the links and details in the description of this video. It says there, support Alexei Peachy's channel. Choose any format that is convenient for you. I will be grateful for any support from you. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. See you.